I still remember the taste of that cold, overcooked chicken breast on my tongue, sitting at the very back table, behind the DJ booth where the bass made the table rattle with every beat. Everyone else was clinking champagne glasses and posing for photos. I was trying to cut through the tough meat with a plastic knife and wondering if I should just sneak out early. It was my sister's wedding. You'd think I'd have a better seat. But no. I was seated at table 18, the last one on the plan. You know the table, the one next to the swinging kitchen doors, where the servers rush in and out, and you hear every crash of plates and hiss of pans. The one reserved for distant relatives or awkward family members they don't want too close. I wasn't always the awkward one. Once, I was her protector. When we were little, I was the one who pulled her out of the river when she fell in. I was the one who stayed up with her when she had nightmares, holding her hand until she fell asleep again. She used to call me her tree solid. Quiet. Always there. But something changed between us over the years. Maybe it started when I didn't go to college like she did. Or maybe it was when I stayed behind to take care of Dad when his health began to fade. Whatever it was, somewhere between childhood and that wedding night, I became invisible. I took a sip of flat lemonade, not even wine, at this table and watched her on the dance floor. She looked beautiful, glowing in her lace gown, spinning in the arms of her new husband. And then, she caught my eye. She smiled. For a second, I thought maybe she'd come over. Maybe she'd introduce me to his family. Maybe she'd pull me into a dance. But then she turned to her bridesmaid and whispered something. They both looked at me and laughed. I froze. That look, that little curl of her lip, it wasn't new. It was the same look she gave me at our cousin's graduation when I wore that old blazer with the patched elbow. The same one she had when she handed me a secondhand tie for a family photo and said, "You can't keep showing up like a thrift store ghost." She used to laugh with me. Somewhere along the line, she learned to laugh at me. A slow burn rose in my chest. But I didn't leave. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I sat there, still and silent, like I always do, listening, watching. That's the thing about being the forgotten one. People forget you're there, and when they forget you're there, they say things they shouldn't. That night, as the music thumped and the laughter grew louder and drunker, I heard things I wish I hadn't, and things that would change everything. It started with a hushed conversation at the table next to mine, her new in-laws, talking in low tones, not realizing how clearly their words carried through the wall of bass. He kept the fake invoices in that red folder. Right. Yeah. Under the desk drawer. God forbid someone audits that firm. He's done for. A pause. A laugh. That's why he needed the marriage new connections. She's the clean front. And just like that, my sister, my laughing, mocking, self-assured sister became something I had to protect again, even if she didn't want it. I sat there a while, pretending not to listen, pretending not to care, but I was listening, and I did care, even after all the ways she brushed me aside. And the more they talked, the more I realized her new husband wasn't just some wealthy guy with a startup and charm. No. He was using her name, her clean background, to shield a trail of scams I could smell even before I heard the words. He had a shell company, fake suppliers, even bribes to a city inspector. I didn't confront her that night. I knew how that would go. She'd roll her eyes, call me jealous, maybe say something like, "You always find something wrong with people who actually succeed." So I left. Quietly, but not before taking a walk past their gift table. Her husband's father had left his phone there, charging behind the wine barrel display. And in one moment, one split-second choice, I snapped a photo of a message that popped up on his screen. One name, one transfer, one number. It was all I needed. Because I'd seen that name before when I helped Dad with his taxes during those late nights before he passed. That name was part of a laundering ring under investigation years ago. I remembered because Dad had warned me. Never work with anyone connected to that group. They're poison in suits. Back home, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling fan spin slowly overhead. I could hear the echo of her laughter, the way she looked right through me. I thought about doing nothing. It would be easier, quieter, but something inside me, something old and solid, like the tree she used to call me, stood up. That night, I made a call. Not to her, not to our mother, but to someone who would listen. Someone who owed Dad a favor from back when he helped clean up the city's finances, a soft-spoken woman in the financial crimes unit. I told her everything I heard. I sent the photo. She said, "We've been watching that group for months. You might have just given us the thread we needed." A week passed. Then 2. I didn't hear from my sister. But one Tuesday afternoon, as I was unloading groceries, I got a call from that same woman. Her voice was calm but alert. "Your tip led us to a document drop. We have enough to open an investigation. Just one question: do you want your name attached?" I thought about it. My name, the one she left off the wedding program, the one she didn't include in her speech. Even as she thanked her childhood dog and her third-grade teacher. "No," I said. "This isn't about me." It happened fast after that. 2 of her in-laws were arrested on charges of fraud and money laundering. Her husband was cooperating, but the firm was seized. News stations ran the story for days. Her fairy tale wedding became headline scandal. And me, I went back to my quiet life, my job at the library, my cat who waits by the window. A few weeks later, I got a letter. No return address. Just one line inside: "I don't know what you did, but thank you. I'm sorry." It wasn't signed, but I knew her handwriting. I didn't expect her to come, but one evening nearly 3 weeks after the headlines broke, there was a knock at my door. Not the usual knock, not the kind the mailman gives. This one was soft, slow, hesitant. I opened it, and there she was. No makeup. Hair pulled into a limp bun, eyes red, like she hadn't slept in days. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not the grand woman in a silk gown spinning in candlelight. Just a girl again, the same one who once cried when her favorite book got soaked in the rain and I read it aloud anyway, filling in the words from memory. "Hi," she said. I didn't speak. She held out a paper bag. Muffins. From Mom's recipe. I stepped aside. Not out of warmth, just habit. She came in and sat on the old corduroy couch, the one she said was too sad for her condo. We didn't talk for a while, just sat. The kettle on the stove started to hum, and I poured us both some tea. Finally. She broke the silence. "They took everything." Her voice cracked on the word everything. The apartment, the accounts, even my name. It's on paperwork I didn't even know existed. I don't know who I married. I don't even know who I am anymore. I looked at her. Really looked. She was unraveling. And yet, part of me was still holding the pieces of who she used to be, the girl who used to tug my sleeve and ask if monsters were real. The girl who laughed in the back of Dad's truck with the windows down, singing off key. Now she was a woman caught in a net she didn't even see until it snapped closed. I stirred my tea. She sipped hers, her hands shaking just slightly. I thought marrying him would give me something solid, a future, a seat at the table. I never thought I'd be used. I didn't say, "You ignored every red flag." I didn't say, "You treated me like I was beneath you." That wasn't the time. Instead, I asked gently, "What now?" She shrugged. "Lawyers, investigations, people asking questions I don't know how to answer." I wish I could just start over. Clean. I leaned back, letting the warmth of the tea settle in my chest. You can, I said quietly. Her eyes flicked up. How? And I almost laughed. Not at her. At the strange irony of it all. You forgot, didn't you? I said. That I've started over more times than I can count. I've worked night shifts to pay bills. Lived in studio apartments where the heater barely worked. Taken care of Dad through the worst of his decline while she traveled for brunches and boardrooms. I rebuilt my life from silence. From absence. Starting over wasn't new to me. It was all I'd ever known. She stayed for hours that night. We didn't talk much more about the case, or her marriage. We just remembered childhood, songs, that summer when we built a tent on the roof and got caught in the rain. For a while, it almost felt like family again. But then, as she packed up her coat to leave, she said something I didn't expect. I don't think I deserve your help, or your forgiveness. She was halfway out the door when she said it. Maybe she thought I wouldn't answer. But I did. You're probably right, I said. But I'm not doing it because you deserve it. She turned slowly. Then why I looked at her. Really looked. And the words came, soft as dust, because I know what it's like to be left behind. The next day, she sent a car. Not for me, for my cat. Apparently, her friend owned a place in the countryside. Quiet, clean, secluded. A good place to rest while the legal storm passed. I didn't ask for it, but I took it as a gesture, not of repayment, but maybe a start. A week later, I got another message, this time on my work phone, from a journalist. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to share what I knew. Off the record, not for a quote, she said, but for context. Your tip blew the case wide open. People deserve to know how deep it goes. I sat with that for a while. Part of me wanted to stay silent, but another part, the one that sat at table 18 watching my sister laugh while I carved cold chicken in silence, that part wanted the truth to live somewhere outside my head. So I agreed. Quietly, carefully. I told her everything, not just about the wedding or the overheard conversations, but about the years before, about Dad's warnings, about my sister's slow drift away, about what it's like to be in the shadows of a family photo and realize no one's reaching for your hand. The article didn't use my name, but it told the story. And for once, the silent one had a voice. My sister still calls sometimes. Not often. Not with the same old sparkle. But the calls are different now. Slower. Honest. She asks how I'm doing. If the heater still clunks in winter. If I need help with the car. It's not a fairy tale reunion. We're not suddenly best friends. But there's something respectful now. Something real. And you know what? That's enough. For now. A month passed, and then another. The headlines faded, replaced by newer scandals, newer names. My sister's face stopped appearing in sidebar news. The media had moved on, but she hadn't. She was still in the eye of her own storm. Her job had quietly let her go, not because of guilt, but reputation risk. Friends stopped answering her calls. Her apartment lease wasn't renewed. Even the florist who did her wedding arrangements left her on red. It's strange how quickly people forget the joy you once brought them, and how loudly they remember the mess. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a small twinge of justice in that. For all the years she pretended I wasn't enough, now she was the one being left off lists, turned away at doors. But that feeling didn't last long, because deep down, I'm not someone who enjoys watching people fall. Even the ones who once laughed when I did. She called again one night. Not for help. Just to talk. I walked past that coffee shop we used to go to as kids. She said, "You remember? The one with the jukebox?" I did remember. We used to pool our change and play the same 3 songs. I'd always choose the slow ones. She liked the bouncy pop tracks that made her dance in her seat. They changed it, she said. It's all sleek now. Black walls, glass counters, no jukebox. Her voice cracked a little, like something simple had been taken from her. She didn't cry. Neither did I. But we both sat in that silence, heavy, honest, a little sad, like 2 kids holding on to the last scrap of a shared world. I started seeing her differently then, not as the perfect girl who left me behind, not as the broken woman cleaning up her husband's mess, but just as someone trying to find herself again. And maybe I saw that so clearly because I had spent most of my life doing the same. You learn a lot when no one asks how you're doing, when you're the one taking the photo instead of being in it. You learn to listen, to observe, to grow quietly. I never needed the spotlight. I just needed to know I mattered, even if only to one person. And now, maybe, she was learning what it meant to feel that kind of smallness, the humbling kind, the kind that either breaks you or softens you. One morning, I got a package. No note, no sender name, just my name, written in soft ink, almost shy. Inside was a photo. Us. From when we were kids. Maybe 7 and 10. We were sitting on a swing, feet barely touching the ground. I had one arm around her shoulder. She was laughing with her eyes closed. Taped to the back was a post-it. This is how I want to remember us. And underneath, one more line. Thank you for never letting go even when I did. I sat there for a while, just holding it. That photo didn't fix everything, but it reminded me that once, before the pride, before the mocking, before the gap between our lives grew too wide, we were just 2 kids who needed each other. And maybe we still were. The day she came back to town for the legal hearings, she asked if I'd come with her. Not as her +1, not as her brother, just as someone who knew the truth. I don't trust anyone else to sit behind me, she said, quietly. I know you'll be honest, even if I don't like what you say. It was the first time she ever said that she wanted my honesty, that she saw it as strength, not a weakness. The courtroom was cold, smelled like floor polish and old paperwork. She wore a plain gray coat, no jewelry, no makeup, just her. She sat quietly while lawyers argued and papers shuffled. Her name was mentioned again and again, not as a criminal, but as someone who failed to perform due diligence. A legal way of saying, you trusted the wrong person. When it was over, she didn't cry. She just exhaled, a long, slow breath like she'd been holding it for months. As we stepped outside, the sky broke open and rain poured down. No umbrella. She just stood there, letting it soak her coat, her hair. I took off my jacket and held it over her head. She looked up at me and smiled, a tired smile, a real one. You still do that, she said. Take care of me, even when I don't ask. I've always done that. I replied. You just stopped noticing. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. We walked home in silence. No cabs, no rush. Just the sound of rain and old leaves beneath our shoes. It reminded me of another walk years ago when our parents had fought, and she'd run out of the house barefoot, and I chased after her through the woods, afraid she'd get lost. That night, I gave her my coat too. Some things never change, I guess. A week later, she sent me an email. Not a long one, just a question. Would you come to Mom's with me next weekend? I want to explain everything, and I think she'll listen if you're there. That one message told me more than anything else. It meant she was ready to stop hiding. It meant she saw me not just as someone safe, but as someone strong. You know, people think revenge is the satisfying ending, that the best stories end with I showed them, but sometimes healing is quieter. Sometimes the real ending is when the person who broke you realizes you were the glue all along, and maybe they start to rebuild beside you. Mom's house hadn't changed much. The curtains were still that same pale green with the faded sunflower prints. The same chipped ceramic angels lined the fireplace, and the smell cinnamon, floor wax. And something old and quiet clung to the air like memory. My sister paused at the doorway. She hadn't been back since before the wedding. It had always been easier for her to stay away to pretend that the past was just something to archive in glossy photos, not something to sit with. But now, she walked through the doorway like someone stepping back into a story they weren't sure they remembered correctly. Mom was already in the kitchen, kneading dough with tired hands. She didn't look up when we came in. "I made extra," she said. "Wasn't sure if you'd eat." My sister stood there, shoulders tight, like a guest in her own childhood. "I'm sorry," she said, quietly. Mom didn't answer, not right away. She kept kneading, folding, pressing. Then she wiped her hands on her apron and turned to face us. "Sit," she said. And so we did. Just like that. No ceremony, no grand words. Just 3 people sitting around a table, like they used to before ambition. Silence. And pride had pulled the stitches of our family loose. The conversation was slow. No blame, no shouting. Just truths. Simple. Sad. Necessary. My sister told Mom everything about the fake companies, the shell accounts, the moments she ignored her own instincts because she wanted so badly for it all to be real. She even admitted that she knew something was off. That the too good to be true charm of her husband wasn't just nerves, it was fear dressed as love. Mom listened. That was all. And when my sister's voice trembled, Mom reached across the table and laid a flour-dusted hand over hers. "You always wanted things to be perfect," Mom said. "Even when you were a little girl, you'd get so angry when the icing on your cake wasn't smooth. But life isn't icing, sweetheart." It wasn't advice, just a mother, telling the truth. Later, when the sun started to dip and the house glowed with that warm, dusty gold light I always remembered from autumns long ago, I stood on the back porch and looked out at the garden. It was overgrown now. The wooden swing was faded and crooked, but I could still hear echoes our laughter, our fights, the sound of Dad's radio playing baseball games no one watched. She came out beside me, hugging her arms to her chest. "You were always stronger than me," she said. I didn't say anything, just kept watching the trees sway. She took a deep breath. "I used to hate that. How you never needed anyone's approval. How you stayed, helped Dad, took the night shifts. I thought you were stuck. But really, I think I was the one running." I looked at her. For once, she wasn't hiding behind makeup or polished words. She was just there. Real. Wounded. Trying. We drove back in silence. No music, no small talk. Just the hum of the tires and the occasional rustle of leaves blowing across the road. But something had shifted between us. A stillness. An understanding. Not forgiveness, not fully, but something close. A few days later, she sent me a photo. Not one of us. Not from childhood. It was the garden. Cleared. Weeds pulled. Soil turned. Old tools cleaned and set out on the bench. She captioned it with just 2 words. Starting over. You see, not all stories end with justice or revenge. Some end in the quiet work of repair, in awkward dinners, in silent drives, in pulling weeds from a garden that once grew wild with joy. And I think that's the real strength, not in punishing someone who broke you, but in standing beside them as they try to rebuild. even when it would be easier to walk away. A week ago, she dropped by my place with a box. Inside were envelopes, letters, some written to Dad, but never sent. Others written to me. I wrote them when I was too proud to speak. She said, "They're yours if you want them." I haven't read them all yet. Some days I still feel the sting, the echo of laughter at that wedding table. The way she turned me into a joke to fit in with people who'd vanish the moment things turned dark. But then I remember the knock at the door, the muffins, the call to Mom, the garden, and I open another envelope, one page at a time. I don't know where our story goes from here. Maybe we'll never be close like we once were. Maybe we'll just be two people walking parallel paths with a little more kindness between them, but that's enough. And for the first time in years, I feel like I'm not invisible anymore. Like maybe, just maybe, she sees me not as the brother who stayed behind, but as the one who always showed up. And maybe that matters more than anything else. Sometimes, it's the small things that stay with you. Like how she started sending me postcards from the same city we both live in. Silly, I know. But each card had something handwritten, a line from a poem, a joke from childhood, or just thinking of you. And I kept them. Not because I needed reminders, but because it was the first time in years she was doing something without wanting anything in return. Just presence. That was new. One Sunday morning, I found her sitting on the library steps. Not the public one downtown, the small neighborhood branch where I work part-time. She was holding a thermos and a paper bag. "I brought coffee and pastries," she said. "The kind Dad used to like?" I raised an eyebrow. She shrugged. "I thought maybe you'd share them with me." We sat on the steps, sipping coffee that had cooled just enough to taste the bitterness. She pointed toward the trees across the street. "Remember when we used to rake leaves just to jump in them again?" I laughed. "We made a bigger mess after cleaning than before." She smiled, not the sharp, posed smile she used to practice for photos, but something softer. Something real. She told me she was thinking about applying for work at a nonprofit. "I don't want to chase money anymore," she said. "I want to feel useful." I looked at her. There was something fragile in that sentence. A woman shedding the armor she wore for so long, standing bare beneath the world. "You've always had something to give," I said. "You just forgot where to look." She blinked fast, like the wind had caught her eyes. "Sometimes," she said quietly. "I don't think I'd have made it through this without you." And I believed her. But I also knew part of her had made it through on her own, because it takes strength to admit failure, to come back, to apologize without expecting to be forgiven. That winter, she asked if we could visit Dad's grave together. It was the first time we'd both gone since his funeral. The ground was frozen. A thin layer of snow dusted the old stone, the letters slightly worn. We stood in silence for a while. Then she knelt down and brushed the snow off the base. "I told him about the wedding," she said. "I even brought him a piece of cake. The good kind, not the dry tier they serve last." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure he appreciated it." She looked up at me, eyes glistening. "He would have hated all of it. The show, the lies, the people. He would have loved the music," I added. "And the open bar." She chuckled. Then she grew quiet again. "I miss him," she said. "Not just when things are hard. All the time." I nodded. "Me too." She looked at me, then really looked. "I think he'd be proud of you," she whispered. I didn't answer right away. Because sometimes, when someone says what you've waited a lifetime to hear, all you can do is hold the moment. And I did. I held it like a prayer. Spring came early that year. The cherry blossoms in Mom's yard bloomed faster than usual, soft pink petals covering the walkway like confetti. Mom invited us both over for dinner one evening, her first time setting 2 extra plates in a long while. There was no grand reunion, no tears, no speeches, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, warm bread, the kind of meal that says, we may not have everything, but we have each other. After dinner, my sister washed the dishes. I dried. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the house sounded like home again. I still sit at table 18 in my mind sometimes. That night, that moment. Her laugh like a knife. But now, I don't sit there alone. Because now, I have the memory of her knock at my door, of her voice, small and honest, of her reaching, trying, hoping. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need to erase the pain, just let it live beside the healing, like pages in the same book. These days, we don't talk every day. But when we do, there's no pretending, no roles, no hierarchy, just 2 people trying to love better than they did before, and that's more than I ever thought we'd have again. So if you've ever been the one at the forgotten table, if you've ever sat in the quiet, wondering why your love wasn't enough to be chosen, know this. Sometimes, people come back, not because they have to, but because they finally understand what they lost when they pushed you away. And sometimes, they come not with flowers or apologies, but with muffins, with postcards, with soft words that land years too late, but somehow, right on time. It's been almost a year now. A year since the wedding. Since the cold chicken and the whisper across the dance floor. Since the sting of laughter that didn't include me and the secret that changed everything. A year since I made that call that unraveled everything she thought was secure. And in that year, a strange peace has taken root. Not loud, not triumphant, just steady. She lives in a small apartment now, 3rd floor walk-up, brick walls, a little garden box outside her kitchen window. No marble counters, no rooftop view, but she says it feels more like home than the penthouse ever did. She has a cat now, not the fancy breed she once posted on Instagram, but a scrappy old tabby from the shelter, one ear bent, eyes full of mischief. She named him Courage, because I forgot what it looked like for a while. She said, she's still untangling legal threads, still answering questions from the authorities, but she's doing it herself. No PR team, no lawyers from her ex-in-law's circle, just her, showing up, owning what she didn't see, taking back what was quietly taken from her voice, her autonomy, her clarity. And sometimes, when she's tired, she calls me. I just need to hear someone who isn't pretending, she says, and I listen, the way I always did. But this time, she knows I'm listening, and that, in itself, is healing. One afternoon, we went back to the river, the one from our childhood, where I once pulled her out when she slipped. We stood at the edge, shoes off, letting the cold water rush over our feet. She looked out across the water and said, "I've thought about that day so many times." I smiled. "You were fearless." She shook her head. "No, I was stupid." I turned to her. "No," I said gently. "You were just young, and you trusted me." She was quiet a moment. "I want to learn how to trust again," she whispered. And I said the only thing I could you already started. Later, back at my place, she found the envelope, the one tucked between my old books filled with the postcards she'd sent. She picked it up and looked at me, surprised. "You kept these?" "Of course I did." She looked down at them, flipping through. One had a drawing of a lighthouse, another, a short quote. "Kindness is never wasted." Her voice was soft. "I didn't know if you even read them." I shrugged. "You didn't know if I'd still be around either." She looked up, eyes shining. "But you were?" I smiled. "I always was. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's not about pretending the hurt never happened. It's about deciding what kind of story you want to live in. One where you hold on to the pain until it poisons you, or one where you turn the page, even when your hands are shaking, and let the light come back in. She volunteers now, twice a week at a shelter for women who've been manipulated, controlled, erased. She never tells them her full story, but she says just enough. Enough to make them feel seen. Enough to say, you can come back from this. And in her quiet way, I think she's becoming the version of herself that Dad would have nodded at from across the room and said, "That's my girl." At the end of spring, she asked if we could go back to Mom's. Not for an apology, not for a special occasion, just for dinner. And this time, she brought the food, cooked it herself. It wasn't perfect. The rice was a little dry, the sauce a bit too salty, but we ate it anyway, together. And afterward, while washing the dishes, Mom looked over and said, "It's nice to hear laughter in this house again." And it was soft, uneven, true, the kind that stays long after the dishes are done. Sometimes people ask me if I regret making that call, if I ever wonder whether it was right to expose her new family to pull the thread that unraveled so much. And here's what I tell them. That call didn't destroy her life. It saved it. It saved her from becoming just another name on a legal document, just another pawn in someone else's game. It brought her back. And more than that, it brought us back. Two people who forgot how to see each other. Two hearts learning how to recognize home again, not as a place, but as a person who stays. I don't sit at table 18 in my mind anymore. I've moved on. I sit in the garden she replanted. I sip her oversteeped tea. I laugh at her jokes, even the bad ones, because the ones who matter, the ones who truly return, don't just apologize. They show up, again, and again, and again, until you stop counting the silences and start counting the moments that feel like hope. So tell me, have you ever been surprised by someone's return? Not the kind with flowers and fanfare, but the quiet kind. The kind that sits with you on a rainy day and just stays. If you've ever felt that or wished for it, I'd love to hear. Because maybe, in the end, that's what we all want. Not a perfect ending, just a soft one, where we are finally seen and never left behind again.